So hi everyone, my name is Brittany Johnson. Just want to take a moment to say hello. I'm a staff counselor here in Loyola's University Counseling Center. And today we're going to be talking about balance, creating balance in your life. I'm going to go ahead and change to the presentation so that you can see that information. This title here, talking the walking the tightrope, seems very relevant to what I'm sure many of you are experiencing right now, because tightrope walking is all about balance and feeling like you have a sense of control. Being enrolled in an online course itself while you're living your life can be a lot to deal with, but an accelerated course, as I'm sure many of you are finding out, it's another level of intensity, and it really requires you to have a sense of balance. So first, I want us to talk about what is balance. Balance is the proper prioritization between your work, which relates to occupational work or your academic work, and then your lifestyle. Your lifestyle is your health, your leisure time and activities, time with family and friends, with any commitments, spirituality, whatever it is, it's a part of your life. The prioritization there does not mean that you are going to equally balance what happens in your personal life and in your work lives. As you walk through many roles, you may find that time commitments are not going to ever be quite the same. They probably should not be the same. But as you walk through those roles, you're going to find that you have conflicts and pressure from your family, pressure from work, pressure from school. That's all existing and conflicting, and it can be very hard to manage it and stay afloat. Creating balance is incredibly important because it plays a role in reducing stress and preventing burnout. There's another presentation that we did some months ago. We talked quite a bit about stress management, so I'm not going to get too much into stress, but I think it is very important for the purpose of this to remind you guys that high levels of stress can negatively impact your functioning. And so this connects to your body's functioning, your cardiovascular system, your gastrointestinal system. Prolonged periods of being stressed really can impact your health and your immune system. So those who are highly stressed for long periods of time may find that they get sick more often, or their body does not feel quite up to par. And then stress itself can involve many symptoms. We each individually have some signs when we're feeling stressed or feeling a bit unbalanced. And those signs tie into different areas of our life. And so physical signs of feeling unbalanced may be having a headache, or finding that your stomach feels upset, a bit off, some nausea, sleep disturbances, changes in your appetite, in your body. You may feel muscle tension, fatigue. Maybe your heart seems to race all the time. It can be difficult to catch your breath. Emotionally, when we're highly stressed and feeling a bit unbalanced, we may notice sadness, feeling nervous, irritable, having trouble making decisions, having moments when we're angry and that comes out in an outburst in an unexpected way, feeling resentment towards ourselves and others, having a very critical attitude towards ourselves and others, feeling powerless, or finding that we're not enjoying our lives as much as we used to. Maybe we're laughing a lot less than we used to, or making less time for enjoyment. And then personally, less time, like I said, with our loved ones, our family, our friends. We may find that we're feeling burned out in our jobs. And that burnout can impact us in many, many other areas of our life. Sometimes when we feel overwhelmed, we may decide to isolate and cut ourselves off from others, stop involving ourselves with certain social activities. We may find that we're having more trouble within our relationships, more difficulty there, and we may find a tendency to self-medicate or other unhealthy methods of coping. And so I'm wondering, for those of you who are here today, maybe you can take a moment in the chat to give me a few examples or a few signs that you know from yourself and how you can acknowledge that you're unbalanced. What signs do you have in your life that you're feeling a bit unbalanced? Okay. And then if anyone finds that it is easier to speak, maybe because you don't have access to a keyboard, um, you can hit the raise your hand icon and we can see about having a conversation as well. I know that for me personally, I know that I'm feeling a bit unbalanced when my ride in the morning to work is not as smooth as it usually is. And it's usually because of how I'm responding to everything that's happening. Um, yeah. I think for me too, sometimes it's feeling overwhelmed when emails ding in my computer or when another task gets on my list, when I start to feel as if I don't have control. I see that a couple of you are typing, and so I look forward to seeing what you have to say. Yes. Someone mentioned that she experiences some of those symptoms. Um, that she finds herself overwhelmed, especially when there is not enough time in the day to get everything done. Definitely. It's interesting because while we're aiming to be balanced, aiming to take care of ourselves, especially in an accelerated program or in any type of task where there's pressure of time, you can feel that race against time, and it's very hard to really take care of many aspects of your life. I'm going to move on to the next slide, but if any other comments come through, I'll be sure to mention those. And so while we're aiming to get balance, there are some very common barriers that can present themselves. One, we just heard from someone else, time, not having enough hours in the day, having moments of having decided what we should be doing in such a way that we don't have as much flexibility in what's actually happening. That ties very much into unrealistic expectations, not being honest with ourselves about what we can do, what we should be doing, feeling guilty. Guilt is considered a pro-social emotion, and that basically means that it functions to preserve our important relationships and maintain the orderly function of communities. And so sometimes when we're feeling guilt, it's because we don't want to danger something, a relationship, or an obligation that's also very important to us. Self-punishment can be a barrier to balance. Sometimes we'll decide that something is not going well in one area, therefore we should only focus on that and deprive ourselves of the other aspects of living, essentially what it means to be a human. Failure to set limits. Comparing ourselves to others is a big one, especially in academic settings. Comparing yourself to your peers, to colleagues, to friends, to family, others who are on similar or very different paths. But comparing yourself to someone else is essentially using someone else's yardstick to look at your life. And usually it never ends up the way it needs to for things to be fair. Poor self-discipline, the inability to say no, and then mostly a humongous barrier to change, a barrier to balance is being resistant to change, not wanting to do anything differently, wanting things to stay the way they are, but your life is different. And so making changes is a necessity. It has to happen. You have to adjust as your schedule does. And feel free to mention to me Go ahead and type if you can think of any other barriers that you found in your life, barriers to feeling balanced, something that gets in the way. I mentioned a moment ago that saying no is a humongous barrier, but keep in mind, if you walk away with nothing else from this webinar, saying no is necessary, and no in itself is a complete sentence. Other barriers can sometimes be beliefs that we have or thoughts, things that we tell ourselves. These are some very common ones. And then once again, as we talk about these, feel free to type any barriers that you find that may exist in your life, any that you found that have been mentioned that you agree with, or ones that are new and have not yet been mentioned here. Sometimes we tell ourselves, I should keep stress to myself. Some find that one way or another in their life, they've come to the belief that to be stressed is to be weak. And so that stress is something that should be dealt with individually rather than utilizing support. Sometimes we tell ourselves, if I just cut out my social life, everything is going to fall into place. That is a very, very common one. My insert person here. So an example may be my mother is the reason I'm so stressed. My boss is the reason I'm so stressed. Insert anyone there. Sometimes we feel like our stress comes from a specific person, and that's the reason why we cannot find balance. There's nothing I can do. And then all I need to do is blank, and everything will be resolved. That's a tricky one because there is not any one single solution. There's no one single solution that exists. It is very true that taking one step to create change can make a big difference in how you feel on a day-to-day basis, but it likely will not be one thing you do that will result in feeling very balanced. Someone is typing. I'm very interested in knowing what you're thinking, as well as everyone else. If there are any barriers that you find to staying balanced, feel free to jot those out or raise your hand. Someone mentioned that they're guilty of that last one, and it seems to make the stress so much worse. And that last one there may be that thought of, all I need to do is blah, and everything will be resolved. And I think that's where a tricky relationship can come in with ourselves, because we can tell ourselves, all I need to do is stay awake 1 hour later and everything is going to be okay. Or I need to get somewhere earlier or change this one habit. But whether we're able to do that or not, depending on how realistic that is, very often it leads to us feeling disappointed in ourselves, feeling a bit negative about our ability to do something, putting a lot of pressure on ourselves in a way that can at times be discouraging. Okay, so this is a basic intro slide here of, oh, another comment. Yes, someone mentioned that that's where they are too. That one thing will always fall apart. It makes everything else fall apart. Yes, and so a big part of this, of the idea of figuring out how to create balance in your life, is thinking about this from multiple aspects of your life, multiple things that you need to do. And then also, I think a big part of this too is acknowledging that you're human. There's an idea of what it means to be human, the humanness of it all, that your time is limited, what you can do is limited, what you have control over is limited. And so being compassionate to yourself and how you think about things. because the likelihood of everything happening exactly the way you want it to every time is very unlikely. Okay. And so initially with balance, prioritization, boundaries, and self-awareness are the first few areas I'm going to touch on. Time management, I went over that more so in the webinar we did about stress management, but it's a necessity. It's very important to have realistic to-do lists. It's important to prioritize the tasks by importance and urgency. So what things are happening right now that are not important, taking the time to identify those and putting those on hold until you actually have more time, maybe until this class is complete and your schedule opens up a bit. Boundaries. How can you have honest conversations with yourself and others about what's happening, what your life is going to look like, and what your needs are? Be mindful of limiting your availability. Maybe certain people in your life are used to being available to answer the phone, to go out, to spend time together. Family may be expecting certain regular commitments. And so how can you realistically limit your availability in a way that is honest and realistic with what you're managing right now? Track your time. A large percentage of people find that they have chunks of time where they're uncertain of what it's going to. And so if you start a task, set a timer for 15 or 20 minutes. At the end of the day, if you feel uncertain about what you did, maybe look at your phone and see if your phone will show you how much time you spent on various apps. Or can you sit there and think about chunks of time that didn't go towards anything that was productive? And then say no. Sometimes you're saying no. Sometimes you're explaining in that no, I'm sorry, I wish I could, but right now, this and this and this is happening. But if you find that you have trouble saying no, that alone may be the biggest thing that you need to start thinking about and working on. And then self-awareness is a big part of this. So paying attention to how you spend your time, as I mentioned. If you don't already know, really paying attention to signs of stress and burnout. When do you know when you are at the end of your rope? When do you know when you don't have a lot left going? And then paying attention to what's happening with your body, between your actions, thoughts, emotions, and in physiology. As we exist, these four things happen simultaneously. So an action may be running upstairs. While someone's doing that, they may have thoughts of like, wow, this is so many stairs. When is this going to be over? Certain emotions may come up. Maybe because someone's thinking, I'm going to feel late. Emotions of nervousness or uncertainty, exhaustion. So many things can happen. And then what's happening with your body? So what's happening when you're running upstairs? Well, your body is very active and moving. But even right now, as you're here in this webinar, what are you doing? Of course, you're here, you're paying attention, hopefully, but what thoughts are you having? How are you feeling? And then what's happening with your body? We have some extra comments that came in. Okay, someone mentioned they're going to leave for a few minutes and they'll be right back. But someone else mentioned that they definitely understand what others are saying here in the chat, that as soon as there is an extra responsibility that comes up, sometimes that leads to a hopeless idea of not being able to do anything, kind of like a big plate that's full, already overflowing. You put one thing on top and then everything else comes falling down. Yes, and someone else mentioned they've had to let go of being obsessive about everything, wanting it to be perfect and perfectly planned, that isn't something that's manageable. Thank you for that feedback. And so someone who just mentioned things being perfect and planned, you are exactly on the right frame of mind with where I was. Because before we look at how to really achieve balance in different areas of our life, we need to take a moment and pay attention to control and choices. It's really important for us to acknowledge the limits of our control. And so it's if you can, take a moment and ask yourself, what do you not have control over? Ask yourself, what do you have control over? We don't have control over a lot of things that happen, the weather, um, sometimes events at work, uh, the schedules of others, the lives of others, what other people do and say, how they react. But in that same line of thought, if you flip it over, we do have control over essentially ourselves. So what we do and how we do it, what we say, how we say it, which can amount to a lot of the choices that we make every day, all day. What happens when we try to exert control over things and people we cannot control? And this is not a rhetorical question. Feel free to answer this in the chat. What happens to you when you find that you're trying to have control over something that you have no control over? Many people find that that phenomenon exactly is the source of a lot of misery. Trying to have control over something that is not in our wheelhouse to control, and then thinking about the time and energy that you put towards that, that could be going towards something else. Because trying to control things that we have no control over, that is a choice. If everything we do is a choice, how does this impact where we are right now? I know that there are many things that happen in our lives that do not feel like a choice, but we make the best choices we can to meet the needs of ourselves and those we care about. So going to work is a choice, even though it doesn't feel like it. But the alternative might be more financial struggle, homelessness, a lack of independence, your family not being cared for. Feeding your family is a choice. Making food for your family is a choice. The alternative might be having to buy takeout, or those you care about hungry. Um, those are choices that you likely would not pick because they may not meet your needs. Someone mentioned that they know that for themselves, thinking I can control others or events leads to negative feelings, sometimes resentment. Yes. Sometimes guilt, that not everything can be accomplished. Yes, very much so. Very, very much so. And so if we think about that, exactly what you mentioned, when we choose to try to have control over things that we can't, knowing that it might lead to negative feelings, in a way, it's almost as if we're choosing to feel negatively. And so how can we focus on what we do have control over and pay attention to the choices that we do have, so that we can take action and think in ways that likely lead to us feeling more in control, but feeling a bit better about ourselves. So a question for y'all is, what choices do you need to make to feel more in control? When you think about your life right now, what's happening and where you are, what choices do you need to make to feel more in control? I know that enrolling in your summer course was a choice that likely you selected because of a goal that you have. Watching this webinar, being here is also a choice, likely because you want to figure out how you can maintain more balance in your life right now. I see that a couple of you are typing. And those of you who are not typing because you're uncertain of sharing, or those of you who are watching this after the recording is passed this could be a time for you to open up a notebook and write this down for yourself. This isn't rhetorical, so take a moment to sit there. You can hit pause in this webinar, or you can keep playing while you think about this, but what choices do you need to make to feel more in control? Mm. Someone said it was very well put earlier, that prioritizing, knowing what I want and putting a plan into action. Yes, yes. Um, Prioritizing is a great way of feeling like you're more in control of your experience. And when doing so, whether it's with time management or to-do lists, I think the key is to make sure that you're a bit flexible with it. Maybe not planning minute by minute, acknowledging that things may not go exactly as you plan, and then being realistic. And so some of the most successful people say that their daily to-do list is somewhere between 5 to 10 items long, that they don't exceed a certain number, because they don't want to overwhelm themselves in such a way where they end up feeling negatively about themselves and what they've done. But thank you for that. That's a great suggestion there. I see someone else is typing. I'm going to go ahead and keep going, but as your comments come through, I am going to acknowledge those. So this same question that was just asked, what choices do you need to make to feel more in control? We're going to look at different areas of your life. Ooh, someone mentioned, side note here, that communicating with others, that may be the cause of the stress. Perhaps if they're aware that we can't do everything alone, yes, definitely. So communicating about what you're experiencing, especially those that you find are sources of stress, but acknowledging that no man is an island, you can't do everything alone. Hmm. Someone else said, for them, they need to say no, that they always agree to add more to their list of things to do, and my important tasks never get done. So yes, saying no. And then it sounds like also prioritizing and reminding yourself of that in a way where you can remind yourself of why you need to say no. And so quickly acknowledging a few different areas of your life, studying, as we already discussed, time management, being realistic with planning and goals, but paying attention to yourself. That self-awareness comes in with asking yourself, have I found my optimal studying place, my optimal environment where I can really focus, where I actually have the time and less barriers to studying. So it may not be a place where you're comfortable. It may not be in your house. If it is in your house, it may be in a space where you have more quiet or more alone time. It may be at times of the day when you're most likely to have some quiet time and peace. So start paying attention to those spaces, and checking in with yourself while you're studying and doing schoolwork. How do I feel right now? How is this going for me? Do I want to do more of this, or do I need to do something different? Someone earlier mentioned having to get rid of perfectionism, wanting things to be perfectly planned. And so this next question is very much for you. How is what you want different from what you need? We all want things to go very, very well. Yes, we want to make A's. Yes, we want to be successful in a way that we're told this is what success means. But what do you need? What do you need to successfully complete the course? Do you need to get your assignments done? Do you need to get your readings done? Paying attention to the difference in what your basic needs are and where those unrealistic wants are. And then once again, checking in with yourself, what's not working? What do you need to change? What needs to be different? And so when it comes to your studying, feel free to add a comment if you've noticed that there's something that's not working and something that you may need to change. But finally, keep in mind that being a student is a job. This means that there are some very important conversations that you need to have with your partner, your family, your friends, your employer, and frame that conversation in the way of, if you were adding an extra job to your life, how would you to communicate to your family about what those changes are going to mean, your friends, your employer? That may mean giving them a heads up. I'm not going to have a lot of time for the next 5 weeks because this and this and this is going to be happening. It may mean having to talk to your kids and say, hi, I'm going to need a bit of quiet time from this time to this time while I am in this place working on these things. And let me know if there's an emergency. I don't want you to be afraid to let me know if something is happening or if your lives are in danger, but otherwise, I need you to do your best, to be on your best behavior. And maybe put in a reward system for them or yourself. I'm not sure how flexible your job is. It may not be flexible at all. But if you do have vacation time, do you need to take off work 1 or 2 days over the next couple of weeks to make sure that you can knock out a lot of coursework as much as possible? And will your employer be understanding if you need to work on something in a way where you have to leave work early or give your commitments to someone else temporarily so that you can really get this done? Start thinking about conversations that you need to have. In your work, do you feel like you have control over your daily work? Similarly, if not, what choices do you have? What conversations do you need to have? What limits can you set? How can you advocate for what you need? No one is going to know what you need if you don't tell them. And telling others what we need is similar to saying no, and that it's very difficult to do. We are not trained as a society to do this in ways where we're comfortable, but it is going to be necessary for you to make sure that you have an experience that is as helpful as possible. And by helpful, I mean telling someone that you need this and this and this. And this does not mean that you are actually going to get that, but it may result in someone being more understanding, a little more flexible, and you may at least feel better in having acknowledged what you're experiencing. Within your personal life, this ties very much into boundaries that were mentioned earlier. Is there someone in your life that's causing emotional drain? It may not necessarily be anyone's fault. Relationships and relational dynamics are very complicated, but sometimes we can have reactions to certain people in our lives who have behavior that doesn't align with what we would like to be occurring. And so who's causing this emotional drain? And what conversations can you have to reduce the stressors in your relationships? Allow yourself, if possible, to have a life. Punishing yourself, reducing any enjoyment from your life is not going to be the key to creating balance and being successful. Yes, you may have to negotiate and compromise, but you don't want to deprive yourself in such a way that you feel miserable. And then identifying non-negotiable self-care. This is a very key part of balance. Self-care is a term that many people are uncertain of in terms of its actual definition, what self-care is and what it means. And so this year just identifies different areas of self-care. So as we're going through this, feel free to type on the side if there are any areas of self-care, any activities of self-care that you feel like you need to attend to. But self-care is paying attention to your physical condition. So exercise, grooming, making sure you're getting sleep, eating, water, basics. But it's also being aware of what you're experiencing. Being kind to yourself and others, paying attention to the choices that you have each day, acknowledging those choices. So even if you're not happy about going to work, changing the way you talk to yourself so you're acknowledging that, well, I'm doing this because of this and this and this, that it is a choice. Self-care is paying attention to yourself and to those around you, but mostly yourself. It's acknowledging and attending to your priorities, giving yourself a chance as a human being to be curious about things and explore things. And that doesn't just mean Googling something that you're unfamiliar with or seeing what something is, but actually giving yourself a chance to do something new, to experience something new. Making sure you have connection to your community, whatever that is for you. Slowing down, finding support, making sure that there are things happening in your life that you enjoy, and then that you have acceptance of yourself, acceptance of your current circumstances, acceptance of your thoughts and emotions, and acceptance in a way that you're not letting things that don't have control over you take control of your experience. This here is a self-care wheel. You can go over this, of course, and in your own time, but it breaks down different areas of your life and ways that you can make sure you're taking care of yourself. And so if you glance at the psychological aspect of the wheel, you may see something like drawing, painting, aromatherapy, journaling, counseling, self-reflection, things like that. As you glance through the wheel, feel free to throw out anything that you see that you think you might want to make sure you do. Emotionally, there are many activities in the wheel. Something that many people find is effective is watching funny movies, watching things that remind them of who they are, what they love, and that makes them feel more human. Laughing, self-compassion, using some positive affirmations in any way that you can. Spiritually, and that does not tend to like solely religion. That's mostly you as a spiritual being. What do you need? So yes, while that may also include things like, church or church community, it does involve cherishing yourself, singing, dancing, meditating, connecting with nature, volunteering. Personally, I think this is one that you guys are probably not as concerned at the moment because you're focusing on getting through your coursework. But is there something you need to commit to each week to really take care of yourself? So if you have your entire week, your week of schoolwork, work, your family, juggling other expectations and tasks, do you have any time to carve out 30 minutes to an hour to relax, to feel more human? So getting a massage or taking a bubble bath, reading a book outside. Is there anything that you need to make sure you're doing for yourself so that you don't feel like you're living a life without reward? Professionally, one of the biggest things that you can do is actually taking time for lunch, advocating for that time. That's usually built into your HR policy. Taking the time and not working during that time. Some may use that time for schoolwork, which of course is understandable. You have to get things done. But also, is there something you need to do during that time to attend to yourself, like going for a walk, eating a meal, calling a friend, watching something, playing a game? What can you do to feel balance, to help those scales balance out a bit more? And then finally, physically, eating healthily, making sure you have checkups with your medical professionals, um, massages, doing things that are nurturing to your body, turning off your cell phone, disconnecting from electronics, making sure you have time for yourself. This is a lot, this self-care wheel, I know. A lot of things were just listed, and I do not have any expectations that you will do all of them. But if you were to look at this and find one or two things that you do to take care of yourself, that is enough, one or two. Because realistically, your time is shorter now than it would be usually. But because your time is so short, because you're going to be going and going and going, it's even more important right now for you to have time to recharge. Someone mentioned reading for pleasure instead of just for work sounds wonderful. And so, how can you turn that into a weekly goal? Can you give yourself like an hour, just an hour in a week to read a book? It may mean that it'll be some time before you finish the book, but can you do that? Can you listen to audiobooks while you get ready in the morning? How can you bring that enjoyment that you deserve to your life? Spending time with like spending real time with friends, not just texting or through technology was also mentioned. And that is a fantastic one. There are so many benefits to spending time with others on like a neurobiological level. And while checking up through technology can be nice, you miss that face-to-face contact, that genuine quality time that can be very restorative, especially if you're an extrovert. And so making that time, you may not feel like you have it, but can you give 45 minutes or an hour to someone, one meal a week? Is there something you can do to let yourself connect with others because it'll be beneficial for you? And so this is something you can ask yourself. And if you're watching this afterward, of course, you can pause it and think about this too. But what actions do you need to take to feel more balanced in your life? What choices do you need to make to feel more in control? So I know some of you are thinking right now, okay, sure, that all sounds great in theory, but let's be honest, I have a lot to do. I don't have time for any of that. I don't have time to be listening to this webinar right now. I don't have time for all the things that are on my schedule. And so this is a moment to ask yourself about what your perspective is. Think about this picture right here. If you are in the forest looking up at these trees, they seem impossibly tall. It seems very daunting. The idea of doing anything to these trees, whether it's drawing them, climbing them, chopping them down, hopefully not. But whatever it is you're doing, it seems impossible when you look at the trees in this manner. And so, can you change your perspective? Can you look at yourself, your life more immediately? Yes, when you're doing time management, you're planning for the future, you're looking at your syllabus and going in and acknowledging all those important dates and remembering to look forward, but also are you looking at right now? Can you take what you're experiencing and chop it up into little chunks so that you're focusing on what's immediately in front of you? And if you're looking at those trees and thinking, wow, this is impossible, I can't do this, are you going to be able to do it if that's what you're telling yourself? Sometimes we need to adopt a positive attitude or just a more neutral attitude. So instead of saying, this is impossible, I can't do this, neutral would be saying, wow, this is a lot for me to tackle. Let me start thinking about how I can do that. Positive maybe, yes, this is a lot, but I can do it. I know I can do it. And I'm going to list right now the reasons why I know I can do it. And so take a moment and think about things in your life that you find you think about negatively. And how do you take that negative thought and reframe it so that you're asking yourself, is this real? Is this based in fact? Do I have data that supports that this is 100% fact? Because I don't think you have data that supports that it's a fact that you can't do something, especially when it comes to the coursework, especially when it comes to what you're looking at on your schedule right now. And then how can you change those thoughts to acknowledge what you hope for yourself, what you want of your future? Is there a small step you can start with? Can you take something like a 5-page paper and turn it into a small step? That may be just picking out your topic, brainstorming, creating an outline. It could be having a question that you actually ask. So after you find your small step, just to get started, What information do you need? Do you have all the information you need? If so, great. But if you don't, ask for help. I think a lot of faculty members say the biggest thing they notice is that when students are having trouble, they don't ask for help until the very end when it's very late and grading is due and it's hard to do anything. And so the moment you notice that you're not understanding something, having trouble, if something is not clear, go ahead and send a message and ask for help. Contact us here with success coaching. If you're having trouble, if you have trouble not just getting information about your course, but if you're uncertain about other things involving your enrollment, involving suggestions, tips, study habits, anything in your personal life too, can you ask for help? Is there help that you need to get, that you need to advocate for? So trying, that small step that you've picked for yourself, that ideally you've got it started with, trying to do that, trying to do a little bit more. And then taking a moment for some self-evaluation, asking yourself, what do I want? What am I doing to get what I want? And then is it working? And then ideally, if what you're doing is helpful, repeating that. If it's not, still repeat this whole process. Try to change your outlook. Find a small step. Get information. Do the things you need to do. Evaluate. And so this is a moment to ask yourself, do you have a task in front of you that seems impossible? If so, how can you change the way you think about it and talk about it? And then what is your first small step? And so feel free to add any comments if there's something that seems impossible that you need to change the way that you think about or talk about, and then a step that you think you need to take after hearing this. So this is, in conclusion here, just some last things to walk away with. These are things that you've already heard, but if you walk away with nothing else, these are the most important things to really, really keep in mind. You need to be realistic, which means having honest conversations with yourselves and those who are in your life. And time management is not just a suggestion, but that in planning, it's mandatory for you to stay on top of everything. Boundaries, that leave work at work saying doesn't just apply to work, it applies to many areas of your life. That also means maybe leaving school in certain areas so that it doesn't overlap. And boundaries means initiating conversations that can contribute to change in your relationships. The people that you're having trouble with right now, the relationships that are causing a bit of emotional strain, connection, making time for connection. You exist in your life, and so making sure you give yourself the chance to do so, laugh, make time for play with your dog, play with your kids, play a game on your phone, or whatever it is that ideally also leads to laughing. Making sure you value the quality time that you've set aside. Don't bring your textbooks to the dinner table. That's a big thing that people do. And they notice that when they stop doing that, that it feels a little different. And so make sure, even if it's just 30 minutes of time with your family, that you give yourself that, and then get to the other things that are on your to-do list. Slow down. Please, please slow down. It's really easy to become overwhelmed and to feel like things are impossible. So breathe. Do what you need to do to relax a bit. That could be meditation, taking a walk. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, do something to slow down and then regroup by finding a first small step, which may just be making a list or asking questions. Self-care, make sure you're taking care of yourself, you're eating, you're drinking water, sleeping, and taking the time to ask yourself what you need. And then most importantly, ask for help. Reach out to those who are around you. Use your support system, which means your Loyola support system here, but also your support system in your life between the other roles that you have and the people who are there, who ideally care about you and want you to succeed. Let them be there for you. Ask questions. from us, ask questions from others, but then make appointments. If there's something that needs to be addressed, don't just think about it and say, oh no, one day I need to. Stop, make an appointment with your doctor, make an appointment with a counselor, make an appointment with Karina, reach out to someone so that we can make sure that you're getting what you need. So we are at the end here. Let me know if you have any questions, if there's something you saw today that wasn't clear, if there's anything you want clarity on. Someone mentioned that they found that they can't help but focus on the section about self-care, making healthy choices to sustain the body, not just the mind. It's a big thing. Exercise plays a big role in emotional regulation. And so that isn't just taking a walk or going for a run or going to the gym. That could be yoga, or it could be stretching. It can really, really help. There is a connection between how your body feels and then how you feel with your mind. And so I'm happy that you were able to focus on that. And I hope that you're starting to think about what choices you need to make to pay attention to yourself in that way. Ideally, you want to get through these next few weeks of this accelerated course, but think about, what do you want to be like when you get there, when you get to the end? What do you want to feel? What do you want to be thinking? Giving yourself a chance to celebrate and not just feel burned out and need a very long nap. And so my information is here on the screen. If you have any questions about the presentation, please feel free to reach out. If you feel like you need suggestions of self-care, or if you saw something today that you had a question about, if you don't feel comfortable asking now, please feel free to reach out. The counseling website is listed here as well. We have a counselor on-call service. And so if you find that you are incredibly distressed, if you're overwhelmed and you can't calm yourself down, if you're having thoughts or emotions that you are not comfortable with and you can't figure out how to deal with, please give us a call, and we'll be happy to assist. Also, feel free to call us in the counseling center if you have any questions. If you feel like you could use some personalized help in getting balanced, make an appointment to reach out with Dr. Karina Fedorin. That's a large part of why we're here and why this service exists.
Right. I know you're just used to. Okay, we're just switching headphones. Hi, everyone. I know you're just used to see my emails and my Facebook posts and Blackboard posts, but I'm human. I'm real. For the ones of you who never talked to me before, I strongly encourage you to reach out if you have any questions, or like Brittany was talking about, setting goals and trying to make sure that we navigate online education together. You are not alone. We are here for you. I'm here for you to listen, to brainstorm ideas and strategies to make sure that everything's going to be okay. So don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you, Brittany, for helping me. And this is the second very successful presentation that Brittany is delivering. So I am very happy that she's here with us today. Is there anything else that you want to say?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate everyone who took the chance to share feedback, what they were thinking. I know it can be difficult to do so in these, and so I really encourage you, if you see something afterward, feel free to reach out if you have any questions about it. If you weren't able to attend and ask your questions here, I would be happy to answer any questions that I can. But I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate some of you mentioning how what you're seeing here, how it connects to your life. And I hope that as you disconnect from this webinar, you take a few minutes to sit there with a piece of paper in front of you and write down some ideas of what changes do I need to start making immediately? What choices do I have? And how can I regain control of my life so I can feel like I have more control over what's happening? Thank you for attending, y'all. I hope you all have a good evening.